Thank you, and welcome back to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric. I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin. Welcome back for our milestone 50th episode this week, and what a week to have it, where we'll be recapping the Patriots' gut-wrenching loss to the Raiders and previewing their upcoming game versus the Cincinnati Bengals. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats300LevelPod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day, as well as at our website at Pats300LevelPod.com. So, Kevin, Patriots lost 30-24 to the Raiders on a last second. I don't even know what to call that. I know we talked a little bit last night because I had to call you to vent because I just couldn't comprehend what the hell just happened. But what's your overall thoughts on the game itself and just everything?
I think, like most people, it was a gut-wrenching, sickening, frustrating, absolute nightmare of a game to watch at the end, where it was probably one of the most idiotic things I've ever seen, and where not one but two players kind of basically lost their mind in the play, not realizing what the score was, what the situation was, and it's just something completely unlike the Patriots. And it's not something where you can't even blame the coaches in that situation, because they shouldn't have to tell them it's a tie game, do not lateral the ball. Like, that's a football 101 thing. And I just don't know what happened. And it's the epitome of this whole season, where it's mistake after mistake after mistake.
Yeah.
And they just keep shooting themselves in the foot. And even this is a little not really off topic, but it's the same, not something a lot of people have talked about, but there was that situation where they were trying to kill the clock and they had a false start where instead of being 2nd and 7, it was 2nd and 12.
Yeah.
And they basically had no chance from there. So it's just every little situation that they need to get right, they can't. And it's just completely frustrating. And this game wasn't just play calling or Matt Patricia, or just execution, fundamentals. They just couldn't get anything right. And it was just completely frustrating to watch.
No, I agree. The first half was, I tweeted this out from our account, but that was the worst I've ever seen this team play in the last 20 years. And I've said that about 4 times this season. But they just didn't look in sorts at all. The coaches and the players weren't on the same page at all. It looked like they weren't getting the plays in time. When they did, they just were on the different page. And then second half, Patriots actually played pretty well up until they took the lead, and then defense started playing prevent defense, and then that last play. But I don't know what Stevenson was thinking, tossing it back. Like, it's one thing where, say, he's about to get tackled, he sees the lane open and there's someone behind him, similar to, I don't know if many people will remember this, but back in 2001 in the AFC Championship game, when the Patriots blocked the Steelers field goal, Troy Brown recovered it. He was about to get tackled. He saw Antoine Harris right behind him and no one near him. So he tossed it to him, and Antoine Harris returned it for a touchdown. If that was the case where he saw something like that, that's one thing. But he was near the sideline. There wasn't any way Jacoby Myers was going to be able to get by. And then Jacoby Myers, once he got it, he ran back 10 yards. You see Bill Belichick screaming on the sidelines, throwing his hands up like, "What are you doing? Get down." And then he throws it to Mac Jones, who's 20 plus yards behind him with Raiders defenders near him. And the only other person on the Patriots near him is an offensive lineman. So what's Mac Jones going to be able to do where there's no one behind Mac Jones for him to, again, lateral it to someone else? So I don't know what was going on. He must have just, in the moment, like he said, trying to be a hero, doing too much. But you have to blame the Patriots coaches for a lot of things that happened in this game, but that specific instance you can't put on the player, and you can't put on the coach, because as a player, I don't care how bad your coaching is. That's something that you should know. Football 101. You have to know the game aware. You have to have game awareness and know the situation.
Yep, exactly. And again, the what you had mentioned too, just I don't want people to kind of forget just the first half, and this is why I texted you in our group chat just about Patricia and the coaching, is that there were so many instances where the play definitely wasn't getting called in on time, because they ran the clock down so much and they had delay of games. They had to take timeouts. And it's just that you need to have the play ready. You need to think 2 steps ahead of what you're doing. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the issues that Matt has had so far, where I don't think he's really got that feel still for the game and understanding what it needs to be called now and thinking, well, if this succeeds or if this happens, what am I going to do next? And I don't think he has that kind of ready. And I think because of that, the other problem with that too is enough people don't really mention is that even with Josh or any of the really good kind of offense coordinators, they don't just tell you the play; they tell you things to keep in mind, things to think about.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine he's doing that if he's struggling to get the play called in on time. And everyone has to remember the call system gets shut off at 10 seconds left. So
15 seconds.
is it 15 seconds?
Yeah.
So 15 seconds. So if he's calling this in late, he doesn't have that extra time to be telling him, oh, there's this defense looking, or beware of this guy, or make sure you don't do this or whatnot. And little tips just to keep it in mind that may not seem really that big, but over time they kind of accumulate and kind of help keep your head on straight. And
that's how in 2018 Jared Goff had a potential MVP caliber season because Sean McVay called the play in really quick, had them get to the line, and was telling Jared Goff what he was looking at because Goff isn't a good quarterback. Granted, he's having a decent year this year, but that's something that benefits of having a good offensive coordinator is they're looking ahead, knowing in situations anything can happen on a certain play. If this happens, this is what I'm going to call. If this happens, this is what I'm going to call. Sometimes you might need to call timeout to just think things through, just to make sure in a certain situation. But overall, you have to know pretty much if this happens, this is what I'm going to call. And it's looking like they're waiting till after they see what happens to then call it in. And then there's not enough time to really communicate everything.
Yeah, and then just the other thing is just a lot of the times you see the camera shots of just Judge and Patricia talking. It just seems like the blind are leading the blind. So it's just really frustrating to watch. And I'll be the first. Me and you both said that it could have worked this year. And
I thought it was going. I honestly believe it was going to work, and I own it 100%. Yes, there's other things that have contributed to it too, where you just have mental mistakes or false starts or things like that. But that also falls on the coaching too.
Yeah, where it's just the most simplest way to look at it is they were ranked 5th in offense last year. They're at the bottom of the pack this year. What has changed? The players they've actually added. They haven't subtracted other than Shaq Mason. And if you added players and the only thing that's happened is they've gotten worse and the coaching changed, you have to look at the coaching. So I don't want to keep harping on that because we got a lot to talk about today. And I think the other biggest thing was Mac's performance, which was, I would say, probably his worst. I can't think of any time he's played worse than this, especially statistically. This is his worst start.
The only one you could really say is the Bears this year, but that's not really fair.
It doesn't even count.
Only had 2 drives.
And he was he was definitely getting sped up, even though he wasn't getting that much pressure at the beginning of the game. Towards the end, he did. But at the beginning of the game, they're actually doing a decent job limiting the pass rush. But I think just over time, we said this before, pass rush isn't just a single game kind of thing. He's anticipating it because he's seen it this whole time. And it's got to be his mechanics and why he was just missing wide open guys. Again, maybe part of it would also be the route running of these receivers. I honestly don't trust any of the receivers to do the right thing at all. I think Tyquan Thornton. I don't know. I'm saying Tyquan. So I'm combining him and Jonathan Smith because they're both idiots now. But Thornton's always making mistakes. He's rounding out his routes. He's not running them effectively. And that was one of the things we actually saw in preseason. He actually was a really good route runner. And I remember in some of those touchdowns he planted and had a really good route run. But lately, he's just been really rounding out his routes and kind of running them lazily. And he's a lot of the times in the wrong spot at the wrong time. And then even Jonnu Smith, everything's hard for him. And I just don't know what's going on with him these last 2 years. He was never this bad with the Titans. But everything's difficult. He's always making mistakes. It makes it look like he's catching like a bomb when it's getting thrown to him. And then you got Aguilar, who's got frying pan hands. And then Kendrick Bourne's probably in the doghouse again because he only played 11 snaps. So it's just really frustrating where they just don't have the weapons to surround them right now. And it's just, they're really getting exposed, especially because they don't have an offense coordinator to kind of scheme up these players that they have.
Yeah. And it's bringing up Jonnu Smith. You know what's actually pretty pathetic is he's having a worse year than he did last year, with last year being his first year in the system. Last year, 28 catches, 294 yards and a touchdown, and then 40 rushing yards and 9 attempts. This year, 24 catches, 224 yards. He's only averaging 17.2 yards per game instead of 18.4 yards per game.
Yeah, it's just we'll talk about this at a later episode, but the things that they're going to need to do in the offseason are, I don't know how they're going to do it, but there needs to be changes. And again, I think it's going to have to start from the coaching. But anything else you'd like to add on Mac before we go on?
No, just I think the one thing is the previous 4 games before this Raider game, I think were some of the best games of his career, where even though the numbers might have not looked as good as last year, given the situation, the players around him, the coaching, and as productive as he was, they were some of the best games. And then even his stats were right up there. He was second in completion percentage, I think 4th or 5th in yards allowed or yards passing. So he has been improving ever since the Bears game, but this was just, it could be, we saw last year Justin Herbert had bad games as a second year. Mac Jones going up against a coach that knows him probably better than anyone except Bill. So that has to factor into it too. Granted, the Raiders don't have a great defense, but Josh is a pretty good coach other than in second halves. But that's just the other thing I'd have to say is I know people, someone we know especially was saying that they should maybe go to Bailey Zappi after Mac's bad game, but you have to remember how good Mac was the previous few games. Even if he wasn't lighting up the stats as a Josh Allen numbers, he was still very effective considering the situation on offense.
Yep. And then kind of moving on, offensive line, they actually played a lot better than they've played recently. But the thing is, when kind of push comes to shove at the end, they started giving up pressure to 3-man fronts, which is kind of a little tough to see. Where this actually kind of gets me into the next thing, not the next thing, but one of the things where Bill was quoted on that last drive. Why not go for the Hail Mary instead of a draw? And he said that we couldn't throw it that far. And a lot of people are taking it to say that Mac doesn't have the arm. He's saying Mac doesn't have the arm strength to throw it that far. And again, it wasn't 55 yards. It was going to be probably 65 yards. He would have needed to do it because again,
behind the line of scrimmage to into the end zone.
Yeah, you have to get into the end zone. You have to do it behind the line of scrimmage would be 55 yards. So you're not throwing it right at the line of scrimmage. And then, but the biggest thing, I think the reason why he was saying we couldn't throw it that far is that he didn't think they could block it that far. They were getting pressure with 3-man fronts near the end of the game. And you would have to hold the ball really physically for probably at least 4 seconds in order to get time for the receivers to get down there.
Probably 5.5 with these receivers.
Yeah. So you would need to hold the ball 4 or 5 seconds. And I don't think he thought they would have the ability to block it that long. And if they did, even were close, there's a good chance Mac could have gotten killed when he went to throw the ball because there was no way they're going to block it long enough. And then you risk a strip sack, you risk an interception on a deflected pass. There's way too much risk in there. I think that's really what Bill was saying, rather than Mac doesn't have the arm strength for it, because everyone knows he does. It's not like he's got a noodle arm. If you can't make a 60-yard pass, you shouldn't really be in the NFL. Even though Cam Newton couldn't do it a few years ago, but now he's out of the NFL. But yeah, that's just the only thing I really wanted to mention about the offensive line.
I think that's fair. I think one thing I just want to talk about before we get into the rushing attack too is, which kind of fits in with the offensive line and the Mac too, is you hit on it a little bit, but just these receivers are just not up to standards of what a starting 5 receivers should be in the NFL, which we thought that receivers were going to be one of their strengths this year since they added Devontae Parker. Assuming everyone was healthy, we thought they were pretty decent last year. You get a pretty good number one. You're not going to have a number one wide receiver, but you'll have 4 or 5 number 2s and 3s to pass the ball around mixed with the tight ends. But they're just not, like you said, they're not running the right routes. They're not getting separation. When they are thrown to, they drop it. Bourne had a drop. Aguilar once again had alligator arms. Jerry Thornton had a good quote where 50-50 balls to Nelson Aguilar when he's wide open, where you don't know if he's going to catch it or not. But so just a lot of things going wrong on this team, especially offense.
Yep. Rushing attack. What do you want to mention here? I thought Mondre looked really good in his game back.
Yeah.
Except for the that last brain fart of his. But even then, I actually thought when he started going through, he broke a couple tackles. I was like, oh my God, he actually may actually get
this.
I
thought that too.
And that's actually something the Raiders defense is terrible, and they're known for missing tackles. So that's also why they probably want to do the draw as well, because it's the safest. Well, it should be the safest play that you're running. Yeah. And the fact that the Raiders tackling is very poor.
And we saw earlier this year at the end of the half versus Cleveland where they handed it off to Stevenson, and then he broke through based on a good run blocking along with bad defensive alignment by the Browns, and he got a 30-plus yard touchdown untouched.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So he played really well. The rookies also they're holding their own. They're not doing anything particularly special, but I think they're actually looking pretty decent on there.
I'm really liking Pierre Strong. Just his speed mixed with the difference of the physical ability of Mondre. Mondre, I thought, had an excellent game where I think it was his career high with 172 yards, 9 point something yards per carry. But also this is after having ankle injury last week where he didn't practice till Friday, I believe. And to still put up that insane game with an ankle injury and not practicing much, I thought was impressive. But he has to be your bell cow. He's your best player. But Pierre Strong, 4 carries, 25 yards, and then he also led the team in catches with 3. But so the rookie running backs are looking good. I think they're going to have a good position group for the next few years as they the rookies continue to develop and Mondre continues to get better and better.
Yeah, not really much else to add on that. Moving on to the defense. I think overall they actually played really well, except for the last drive. And then even that, the prevent somewhat made sense where they have no timeouts left. You really want to keep them in front of you, make sure they burn clock. And you don't want to, we saw it, I think it was a week or two ago, when I think it was the Rams ended up pressuring them too much and they got burnt, but then the Rams ended up coming back and winning anyway. But let's say you play too aggressive and then you have one guy back there, no guy back there. You don't want to do that either. So it's a balancing act, and it just didn't work. What their plan was. Plus, they also that was not a catch. So
that wasn't a catch. But I think the one thing that annoyed me with the prevent defense, which I get it, you don't want to allow a big play, but the thing is the Raiders had no timeouts. They were allowing them to catch it and go out of bounds. It's not like they were allowing them. They were restricting the out of bounds and then forcing them inside. So they were able to get a 10-yard catch and go out of bounds, 10-yard catch and go out of bounds for first down and not really bleed too much clock. So that's the issue I had. And then also you're playing prevent defense, but on that last quote unquote touchdown, you didn't have safety help over the top as well. So if you're going to play prevent defense, you have to stick through it. And then Marcus Jones, he had pretty good coverage, but he's 5'8" versus a wide receiver. And again, he didn't catch it, but if there was a safety over there, it probably wouldn't have been a touchdown anyway, or been close.
And I think the other thing that was really kind of showing out in this game, and something we've talked about, I think in 5 questions a bunch of times, is Derek Carr is just not the quarterback for them.
Oh yeah, he was awful.
He showed how much he was spooked in this game. You get any pressure on him at all, and he looks like Brett Favre out there trying to just throw one up on his back foot, has no idea what's going. There's the play that was almost it could have been picked off by Jonathan Jones that went
should have been picked off, and that would have won the game where it hit off his helmet.
Where he was getting pressure, he didn't even look, and he threw the ball up there, and it's just this is why the Raiders aren't going to do anything with it at quarterback, and I think that's why you're either going to see Tom Brady, assuming he plays next year, or if not, probably Jimmy Garoppolo there next year.
I'm just thinking like how good this Raiders team would be even this year with Tom Brady instead of Derek Carr.
Yeah.
Yes, one thing I really want to talk about was how well the Patriots defense played, where you limit Devontae Adams to only 4 catches and 28 yards. Josh Jacobs doesn't run for 100. He ran for only 93 yards on 22 carries, which is I think 4.2 yards per carry, below his season high or season average of 5 something. But in the second half, he only ran for 23 yards on 8 rushes, so 2.8 yards per carry. So defense did a really good job, especially in the second half. But how many times did Derek Carr miss wide open guys where there's a guy running a seam, and if he hit him, it's pretty much a touchdown. And he just missed it. And the Patriots did get bailed out several times because of that. But I think they kind of also knew that too, where Derek Carr isn't the best. So they might have not had to always have safety help over the top for everything. But
yeah,
Carr was awful. And this Raiders team would be scary if they had an actual QB.
Yeah. I know one thing you wrote here in the notes, and I want to kind of ask about this because I didn't really see it as this, but you mentioned Barmore, as we know, returned. You said it made an impact. I didn't really notice anything of him really being
he had he was credited with half a sack, but there were several times where he was getting by his guy and forcing Carr out of the pocket, and that's when he like scrambled and then threw it up and whatever.
Okay.
So he didn't really have too much an impact on the stat sheet other than the half a sack, but he looked like he took off. He came back where he left off.
Yeah.
And I think that if this team wants to have success, if they want to make the playoffs, they have to get a good pass rush. And Judon was pretty much non-existent this game. But if you're able to have Judon from the first 10, 12 games of the season mixed with Uche the last 6, and then Barmore, Aquale, and Wise inside, that's the way you're going to win this. Offense hasn't shown that it's going to be able to put a lot of points on the board. This defense is going to have to carry this team, and it carries it by this pass rush. And by having Barmore back and healthy, that's the way that they can do it.
Yep. I think one thing, just to be fair to Judon, is they dropped him back into coverage a bunch of times.
Yeah, I think he dropped back in coverage 10 times, but even when he was pass rushing, it looked like he was getting winded, and there were times where he just couldn't beat his guy, which sometimes there are weeks like that. But
all right. Anything else on defense before I move on to penalties or news around the NFL?
I think the only one last thing is just how dominant the defense was in the second half, minus that last drive. 5 drives, and they allowed 23 under 45 yards in 5 drives, under 40 yards in 5 drives, 4 punts, and then the pick 6.
Okay.
And then just one last thing for the game is, especially in the second half, it just seemed like both teams just were trying to let the other team win.
Yeah.
Where the Patriots, they get the ball back with good field position, and then they can't capitalize. Then the Raiders get the ball back, they're going, and then they're just a penalty or something like that. And it just looked like neither team wanted to win.
Yeah. That brings us to our next one, which we actually didn't put on here in our notes. I got to think off the top of my head. 3 up, 3 down.
I forgot about that.
So
I'll go with mine because I know mine.
Okay.
Number 1, Stevenson, even though he did have that lateral to Jacoby Myers, 19 carries, 172 yards, and a touchdown. And he's just shown that he's your best player and one of the best running backs in the league. And just, Number 2, Big Dick Nick, 3 field goals again. He's just showing Stevenson's your MVP. Nick Folk is one of your most reliable players and has been the last 4 years, last 3.5 years. 3 field goals, 1 from 47, 1 from 54. And the only thing that really hurts him is distance, which even when it's over 50, if it's not bad weather, most of the time it looks like he'll make it too. So that's number 2. Number 3 is Marcus Jones. I know he allowed that touchdown at the end, but again, A, it wasn't a catch. His foot was out of bounds. B, it was pretty decent coverage. And C, there should have been safety help over the top. But a lot of times he was on Devontae Adams, one of the best wide receivers in the game, and held him to just 4 catches for 28 yards. So pretty incredible game by him, especially the pass breakup on the first Raiders drive, I believe, where Carr threw a deep ball to Devontae Adams, and then you just saw Marcus Jones' speed just catch up, even though he was beat at first.
Yeah, I think all those are really fair. Ramondre, I'd say number one. Kyle Duggar, I'll throw in because of the pick six. That was really good anticipation, something that you knew you're going to get at least one interception against Derek Carr. Kind of how Bill would say about Brett Favre, and I think even Justin Herbert, that he's going to give you a free, you just got to catch him. So those are two, and then I'll go with Marcus Jones as well, just because I think he had a really good game, except for that last kind of drive. But part of that was on the play calling, and then part of it,
that was on the play calling.
Yeah, so I wouldn't really blame him on that. But I think he's really showing into a playmaker, and I wish he had a couple more inches, but he's showing that he's got something going on. Three down, I'll go with mine first because I can think of him off the top of my head. Jacoby Myers, that throw is inexcusable, and he has to be on there because that was it lost him the game. Mac Jones, worst game of his career. And there was another thing from his next gen stats where they have this stat called expected completion percentage, and it basically takes into account how it feels, what the completion percent should be based on where the receiver is and whatnot, and what your actual completion percentages. And Mac Jones's was a minus 20%. So it varied by 20% downwards compared to what was actually open in there. And part of that are drops. It takes into account too. So he does have some receivers drops, but he was really bad in this game. Compared to his other games, I think because he could have been worse. And he got better in the second half. And the last one was, why am I forgetting? Nelson Aguilar. He is just, I just don't know why he's out there anymore. It's just, he can't catch anything. There's a risk of him fumbling. He was targeted 6 times. I think he had 1 catch maybe. And it's just a waste of a time throwing to him.
Yeah. No, that's fair. My number one is coaching just overall, where we saw at the end of the first half, they have first and goal at the 2. They run it once. They don't get it. Then the last 3 plays, you don't run a single one with a running back in the backfield. There's one where Mondre was on the field, and then he motioned out, and they passed it. And then they had 2 with Marcus Jones in the backfield. You have one of the best running backs in the game, hand it off to him 4 times, or do the QB sneak, which they tried at the end, but they called the timeout. There were twice where they had to waste timeouts during that drive because they didn't get the play in time. And it's just those situations where I understand if it's the preseason and that's happening, but this is the 14th game of the season. That can't be happening at this point in stage, especially in critical moments like that, where you have to burn timeouts and you have to go 2 yards and you can't even get 2 yards. The Raiders allowed 15 consecutive touchdowns for when their opponent was inside the 5-yard line. So it was just frustrating, lack of discipline and too many penalties, not knowing the situation, just so much on the coaching. Number 2, I'd have to go with Jacoby Myers. Just like you said, you can't do that. You have to know the situation. And like you said, that's probably one of the worst plays in NFL history, replacing the Buff fumble and the Colts fake punt. And then number 3 was Mac Jones, where he was just terrible all day. I'm not writing off on him. I still think he's the guy. It's just this one game he was going up against a guy that knows him better than anyone. So that's it in order.
All right. Moving on, news around the NFL. Colts collapse. I don't think there's really much to talk about, but biggest collapse in NFL history. 33-0 lead to the Vikings. I actually turned it on in the second quarter, so it was 30-0, and I was like, I'm not gonna bother watching this. I'll watch. I ended up watching the PNC Championship. I was like, they'll be more interested in this, and then I found out that the Colts ended up losing. Awful officiating really around the league, and we saw that once with that should have been no catch. The Giants game on Sunday night was even more. There's a bunch of egregious things. Did you see the the non-pass interference calls.
Yeah.
Like, those were ridiculous. He was
Yeah.
getting manhandled,
Yep. He
and
was
they
pretty
didn't
much
call anything.
tackled.
Yeah.
And then there's the one of McCollin where he was off the line of scrimmage, looked at the ref. The ref told him to move up. He moved up, looked to the ref, and then the ref gave him the signal that he was fine, and then put his hand right on the flag. And then once the whistle was blown through the flag, or once the play was, so it's, I don't understand how this continues to happen for the non-catch, especially, or the touchdown in the Patriots game. How does the NFL not have cameras on both ends of the pylon, one facing the goal line, one facing the out of bounds marker?
Yeah. And
the officiating, it seems like the last few years is getting worse and worse, and this year is one of the worst. I don't the thing that makes it even worse is the NFL. In the NBA, they at least acknowledge when mistakes are made. In the NFL, they just keep backing up and support the decision even when it's wrong. And with betting being on the NFL and being heavily involved, I don't know how this can continue to happen where it can impact games and impact outcomes with huge financial implications.
Especially that catch basically ended up affecting what the money line was on the game, because the over under was 45. That catch ended up making it at, it was 20. They were tied at 24 apiece.
It made it tied at 24, so it brought it to 48.
48, yeah. So that ended up going over the over under there too. So just something to keep in mind.
And then, like, what the Korean baseball organization KBO does is, if umpires are inconsistent or aren't good, they demote them. And that's something I think all sports should incorporate. Yes, there are human error, mistakes happen, but you have to be accountable. And if you're not held accountable and this keeps happening, this is just going to keep getting worse and worse. And that's something we've seen over the past few years.
Yep. Next thing, Bengals come back against the Bucks. And just another loss for Tom. I feel bad for him, especially now. Dolphins and Jets lose. Chargers squeak out a win. So 2 of the 3 things that could have happened for you, somewhat keeping your playoff chances alive. We'll see kind of what happens.
Interesting thing on the play. I'll just talk about the playoff possibilities quick before we go into our next segment. But even though with the Raiders loss, if the Dolphins lose to the Packers next week, which is a possibility, and then the Jets are facing Seahawks and Jaguars over the next 2 weeks. So if they just lose one of them, if the Patriots find a way to beat the Bengals and then beat the Dolphins head to head, they clinch a playoff spot and don't even have to worry about the Buffalo game. If the Patriots won this game versus the Raiders, if the above scenario just happened, you wouldn't even have to worry about beating the Bengals. You would just have to beat the Dolphins outright. So that's just the implications of that game, that play, and also the block punt, which we didn't even talk about, where they snapped it where the team wasn't even ready, and then the having to kick a field goal instead of getting that touchdown on 1st and goal at the 2. All those plays impacting the Patriots losing this game versus the Raiders in a game they should have won and probably would have made the playoffs if they won that game.
Yep. That's why it's very frustrating, and kind of just a summary of the whole season. In that one,
if they win out, they make the playoffs. It's guaranteed. If they don't win out, there's still a pretty good possibility if they win 2 or 3. But I don't know if this team can win 2 or 3, especially against their next 3 opponents. But we'll have to see.
Yeah. All right. 5 questions. This one's a lightning round, so it's going to be really quick. And it's the same theme for everything. Will this coach be employed by their team next year? Brandon Staley.
Yes, because the Chargers are most likely going to make the playoffs unless they have an epic collapse, where if they have an epic collapse, I think they have to lose their next 3 games. And if that happens, then he won't. But I don't see that happening. So yes, unfortunately.
Yep. Same exact answer for me there. Nathaniel Hackett.
No.
Agreed. I don't think he'll be there. Matty P.
He will be in the Patriots front office. He won't be offensive coordinator.
I agree as well. I think he could be maybe offensive line coach.
I don't think so. I don't think Bill's going to demote him from offensive coordinator to just a position coach. I think out of respect, he'll also just put him in front office so it looks like he's given a different role.
Yeah, I could see that. That makes sense. Cliff Kingsbury.
No.
I'm going to say yes, just because the amount of money that they have tied up with him and the GM, they just signed extensions this past year. And the Cardinals are known for being a cheap organization. So I think they're going to stick with him, even though they should fire him.
That's fair. I kind of want him fired because I'd want him to take over Pat's offensive coordinator. But
Jeff Saturday.
no, I don't think he'll be head coach. He might be on the coaching staff.
I don't think he'll be with them at all. Dennis Allen.
The Saints head coach, I say no.
I'll say yes. They'll give him an extra year because they don't have a quarterback. I think that's a big thing.
That's fair.
All right, going on to the Bengals in the next 20 minutes. So Bengals coming in 10-4. They started off the year really slow. They weren't looking the same old Bengals. Maybe a Super Bowl coming off that Super Bowl high, but they're starting to look the same now. Chase is back, and Burrow's playing pretty well. Almost 4,000 yards already, 31 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He's been sacked 37 times. And then the running attack, they got Joe Mixon. He's about almost four yards per carry, 60 yards per game, 6 touchdowns. He's their kind of biggest back that they got. And again, receivers, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and then Mixon, and then Hayden Hurst get some catches as well. So what are your kind of thoughts on their offense and what you really want to attack here?
Yeah, I think this is going into the season. I thought most of us would agree that this is going to be one of the best offenses that they're going to face, where you have a pretty good running attack with Joe Mixon, and then you have 3 really good receivers in Chase, Higgins, and Boyd. I think the one thing that helps the Patriots is this past week, they pretty much shut down the Raiders offense, which you could argue is right up there. Granted, Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow were coming back from injury and weren't at 100%. And Derek Carr's the quarterback versus Joe Burrow. But they limited.
I think that's a big.
No, that is a big. But you saw how Devontae Adams still wasn't really able to do much. You saw Waller, other than that touchdown, not able to do much. Renfrow do nothing. So if Jack Jones is able to come back healthy, if Jalen Mills is able to come back healthy, this defense possibly can have the ability to shut this team down or limit them out. I don't think shut down is the right word. I think limit them. So that's what's going to happen. If the Patriots want to win, that's what's going to have to happen. Joe Burrow has been sacked a lot. This offensive line isn't great. It's better now than it was at the beginning of the season. But for the Patriots to have success, they have to be able to get that pass rush, like I was talking about last segment. And that'll force Burrow to have to throw the ball away earlier, possibly causing an interception or some strip sacks. And that's the way this Patriots are going to, if they want to win, they're going to have to, is forcing turnovers and limiting the offense. You can't allow big plays, a 60-plus yard touchdown throw to Jamar Chase. Let them get it 5-yard, 10-yard completion over the middle, but not allow anything big and just bend, don't break defense.
Yeah, exactly. And just kind of looking at the stats, and Burrow's been sacked in the top 10 of sacks. So the leader right now is Justin Fields at 46. But Burrow's down there at 37, is tied with Jalen Smith. So it's actually tied for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tied for 6th in most sacks. Yeah. So that's a pretty big number. And thinking about how bad the Patriots offensive line has looked, Mac Jones, even though he's missed 3 games, only 26 sacks for him. So that's something to kind of keep perspective on too, for that. So I think if they can generate pressure with Uche, with Judon, with Barmore, and maybe even Wise if he starts heating up again, I think that's the key of the game is generating pressure, and that way he doesn't have time to go hitting a 60-yard pass to Chase. And hopefully Jack Jones is healthy for this week. So I'd like to see him in there and see what he and Marcus and Jonathan, all the Jones can do in the secondary. So I think that's their best kind of matchup by having all of them.
Yep. And then one thing, just going back to something you mentioned earlier, was the Bengals did start off slow. They started the season 0-2, where they lost to a bad Steelers team, and then they lost to the Cowboys by 3. But then they've won 10 of their last 12, including 6 straight. They lost to the Ravens in that by 2, and they lost to the Browns by 29. or 19. Sorry. They beat the Chiefs by 3, but other than that, they haven't had any really impressive wins. They beat the Dolphins by just double digits, but that was earlier in the season. So I think this team is, as the Browns showed with Jacoby Brissett as quarterback, they beat them by almost 20. This team is beatable. You just have to not make mistakes and try and capitalize on advantages, or not let them make big plays, not make big mistakes at your game, which is something the Patriots haven't done all year. Yeah. But if they do it this week, then it's a possibility they could win. It's not like they've blown out the Bills, they've blown out the Eagles, they've won some tight games, or they've won big against some not great teams.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And then the Bengals defense, what can you say about them?
They're an okay defense, passing 18th most passing yards at 226 per game. They have the 12th most interceptions with 11, 14th highest pressure rate at 20. Little pressure, but it looks like they're not able to capitalize much on getting sacks. And that's something that we've seen this offensive line for the Patriots being inconsistent. If the Patriots want to have success, they have to keep Mac upright and not get pressure, not allow pressure, so that it allows the receivers that aren't great to begin with to get separation and finally make some plays. So that's something that we'll have to see what happens if the offensive line holds up. It did look better this week compared to weeks past, but it still wasn't perfect. Their run defense, 7th best in run yards allowed at only 109 per game, with the 8th best yards per carry at only 4.2. So pretty good run game, middle of the road pass defense. But one thing we've seen, even though I think Taylor's not a good coach, we have seen him make really good halftime adjustments. We saw it last year in the AFC Championship game versus the Chiefs, where the Bengals were getting blown out by, was it 21-3, 17-3, something like that. They came back to win. They did that against the Chiefs during the regular season last year too. They did it versus the Chiefs this year too. Against the Bucs, they were down by 17 or 14 in the second half, and then they shut out the Bucs and came back to win by 11. So unlike the Raiders, which are terrible in the second half, the Bengals are actually pretty good in the second half. So the Patriots, if they do, you want to start fast so you don't have or behind big and then you have to catch up. But if you do have a lead early, you have to keep your foot on the throttle, because this Bengals team has shown that it can come back and make adjustments. So yeah, that's something that you're going to have to play a full 60 minutes of football, not 59 minutes and 59 seconds. Like last week, you have to play full 60 minutes until end of regulation. And then if it goes to overtime, you have to play the full 10 minutes.
Yep. So that's going to get us into our predictions. Patriots are not favored in this game. Bengals are favored by 3.5 points. It started out at 4 points. Over under is only 39.5. So I think they're kind of judging based on the Patriots offense and their defense. So I'll go first. I have the Bengals winning this 20-17. I just still think that the Bengals are kind of on a tear right now lately. And I think even of the 17 points the Patriots score, I think one touchdown of that is going to be a non-offensive touchdown. So either special teams or defense, just because we've actually seen, I think they have as many defensive / special team scores in the last few games as they've had on offensive scores. I think is I remember seeing that.
On offense, they have 24 touchdowns on the season. On defense and special teams, they have 6. So 20%
I think it was the last 3 games.
I'm not sure the last few, but it's probably right around that. But on the season, 20% of their scores are coming from defense and special teams, which is pathetic. But
yeah, so I think that's going to be the same story of this. I think they'll get some sort of score that way, and it'll look closer than it actually is. I don't think I think part of this is also me being jaded from just seeing this last game and how bad it looked. And you got to think, can it even look? Are they going to let it look that bad again? I would hope not, but I just don't know if they have the players and the coaches to actually make the changes for this. So I have the Bengals winning this.
That's fair, and I don't know. Part of me is just thinking, we know the talent that they actually have on this team, where this team won 10 games last year with a rookie quarterback, and it's looking right now that they're not going to make the playoffs. If they want to make the playoffs, they have to win this game or most likely, or get lucky and beat Buffalo somehow in the last game of the season. Hope that they don't play their starters.
Yeah.
Something's telling me that they're somehow going to get it done. I don't know how, but I have them winning 27-23, where defense holds them to field goals. Zach Taylor makes an idiotic decision at head coach, which costs them some points. Offense somehow looks better. But if you think about back to the 2018 season where the Miami Miracle, where they lost on the touchdown, that touchdown at the end of regulation, Patriots ended up, that was kind of a sparking point where, granted, they lost the next week versus the Steelers, but then they played their really good last 2 games of the season, then ended up winning the Super Bowl, where that was kind of the catalyst where it kind of made them wake up and realize they have to start playing full complementary football. And maybe this is what does it for them, where they got kicked in the nuts, and this is the wake up moment where, okay, we can't keep making these mistakes. So that's my eyes haven't shown me that they can do it this year, but it's my faith in Bill as a head coach and seeing the talent around them, how this team made it to the playoffs last year, winning 10 games. And you could argue they probably should have won more if it wasn't for a few bad breaks going their way, but something tells me Patriots win 27-23.
All right. I hope you're right on this. I hope,
and probably one of those touchdowns is going to be special teams or defense too. But
okay. Still showing that the offense is in as where it should be. But
yeah.
Again, hopefully you're right on this. I ended up selling the tickets because it is Christmas Eve. We host Christmas Eve, so I wouldn't be allowed to go a game. So I will be at home watching this one. So won't be there from the 300s, get that different perspective, but we'll see how it looks. Hopefully it looks as good as you said it was, and hopefully when we talk to you next week, it'll be a Patriots victory and there will be another chance of making the playoffs. So we will see what happens and talk to you guys next time. And I don't think we'll talk to you guys before then, so have a Merry Christmas. Enjoy your holiday with your family or whatever you do. So make sure you subscribe, rate, and review Apple, Spotify, wherever you consume your podcast. And then follow us on Twitter, Instagram at Pat's 3handle level pod for up to the minute updates. And we'll talk to you guys next time.